Hey everyone, welcome to Monday Mornings with Dr. Nick, Authentic Leadership in Action. I'm your host, Dr. Nick Davies, and I'm on a quest to learn as much as I can about leadership, specifically School of Leadership. Each week, I meet with leaders across the country and then summarize those meetings in short articles, videos, and a podcast. This right here is a short form podcast on leadership intended to give you tips and advice that you can use in your schools right away. I love the challenges that come with leadership, and I love talking with leaders about their journeys. I'll use everything I learned to continue my personal mission of having a positive impact on people's lives so they can become the best of which they're capable of becoming. So ready or not, here we go into this week's topic. All right, episode number 5, Never Apologize for the Hustle. I met with Nate Clark. He is the Chief Operating Officer at Polaris Universe. This is one of the very few Black-owned TV networks, and Nate brings his leadership background in finance and tech to that industry. We had a fascinating conversation. We were connected through a mutual connection, and we both went into this conversation expecting something totally different, and just had a blast talking to each other over the phone for about 30-40 minutes. And so let's jump into my 3 takeaways from this conversation. So never apologize for the hustle, premortems, and what's your default setting. So let's go into more detail on all 3 of those things. So first, never apologize for the hustle. Nate said this with a lot of enthusiasm. Entertaining, engaging person to speak with, just because of the passion that comes through in his voice. This is something that I truly believe he lives out on a daily basis. And he said that if people know that you hustle for everything, there's no shame in what you go after. That's just how you are. You just go after things. You have to have persistence. You have to have perseverance, and you always have to keep going and finish what you start. We also talked about failure as well, and failure is a necessary step in any journey. So our perspective is really what kind of changes when it comes to failure. If it's treated like a milestone compared to the end result, that makes a big difference. If it's a milestone in your journey, you know that that's just one piece of it. You might have failed, you can move forward. If it's the end result, then there's nothing you can do and you're done. So how you view failure is really important. Next up, premortems. This is something I really know nothing about. And this part of our conversation is exactly why I love meeting with new people and learning from them, because you don't know what you don't know. So this idea of premortems, at least in schools, we do a lot of what are called after action reviews. An event happens, maybe it's a drill, maybe it's an actual emergency, and we look at what went well, what could be improved, and what are we going to do better next time. But with a premortem, you look at a project you're working on and you say, okay, it's 6 months down the road. This big project was a large failure. Why? And then you go into and you kind of pick apart what could go wrong, or maybe you could pick apart what could go well. But the idea is that you need to look ahead and try to identify any bumps in the road with your team. So there's a few things that this does. First, it's going to check egos. Because if you're talking about what could possibly go wrong, at the end of this, no one can say, well, I told you that this wasn't going to work, because all of this should be talked about at the very beginning. So you're checking egos right there. And everyone's going to have to buy in, which is the second biggest thing, is that it builds team ownership. So it forces everybody to look at the problem in different ways and try to assess what's going on. So it's going to make the project and the problem stronger in the long run. And if things don't go well after you've done this premortem, down 6 months down the road, there's team accountability that everyone played a part in the failure of the project, as opposed to just one person being able to point fingers, because most of us are all part of teams, and we need to be together in our accountability. We also kind of talked about, we talked about failure. This came up again, and being afraid. And so Nate was saying that to turn towards what others are afraid of. That fear piece is normal, and it doesn't change the outcome of an event if you don't let it. So it was just an interesting perspective on fear, which also kind of led into the last key, which was, what's your default setting? Nate asked me this question, and when him and I talked about it, he talked about a lot about stoicism in our conversation. And that was definitely what I took to be a default setting of his, or at least something that has impacted him. In short, if you don't know much about stoicism, it's trying to keep a rational mind, regardless of what happens to you, and understand what you can and cannot control in life. And so, as Nate put it, good news, bad news travel at the same speed. And you don't know from somebody else's perspective how they're going to handle news. So just go ahead and share it with each other. And really anything that is happening It's just an event. It's all up to you on how you process it and how you proceed with whatever's going on. Try to take that emotional component from it. So those were 3 key takeaways I took from this, as I said, fascinating conversation with Nate Clark. I had an absolute blast talking with him. And then at the end, he did something that I, again, just thought was really interesting. He asked if he could just kind of give me his perspectives on me. And he jumped into this short, essentially guess of some things about my personality, long-term goals, and ways that I might approach problems. And he was shockingly accurate in these guesses of what he thought about me, which I thought was really interesting. I've never had somebody do that before. And we'd only talked for about 30, 40 minutes. And he was able to pinpoint, just based on the questions I was asking him, some pretty personal things, which was impressive. He said he had been taught that years ago, and he uses it just as a way to connect with people. Lastly, Nate is an avid reader. He gave me a large number of books, and so I just narrowed it down to about 5 right here. And so here are some books that he recommends. Left of Bang by Jason A. Riley and Patrick Van Home. Principles for Changing World Order, Ray Dalio. Skunk Works by Ben Rich. Polymath, Wakas Ahmed, and Hal Moore on Leadership by Hal Moore and Mike Wardia. Again, Nate, thank you so much for your time. Great conversation. Hope that we can stay in touch in the future. Thanks for listening, everyone. Please rate and review this episode on whatever platform you use to listen to it. And be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Who in your network do you know that could benefit from the message from today? Please share this with them. If you want to talk more about this topic or any others I've talked about in the past, reach out to me through LinkedIn. You can find me, Nick Davies, PhD. We see each other again next week. Thanks.